Dan Krasner. I'm the Executive Director of Integrity Florida. We're a nonprofit, non-partisan research institute. We're a startup made in Florida. We founded the organization on January 21st of this year. That was the 2-year anniversary of the Citizens United decision. A Supreme Court case at the U.S. Supreme Court that made the corrupting influence of money in politics the defining issue of our time. Today we're releasing a research report titled Corruption Risk Report, Florida Ethics Laws. I'm here as a native Floridian. I love Florida. And it pains me to say it, but Florida leads the country in public corruption. Integrity Florida looked at U.S. Federal public corruption convictions from the years 2000 to 2010. And Florida is clearly the #1 state in the country for federal public corruption convictions. On top of that, Forbes magazine has named Florida, has named 3 of our cities to their list of America's most miserable cities and noted corruption as a reason. Recently, an entity called State Integrity Investigation, a separate group from Integrity Florida, released a Florida Corruption Risk Report Card. On that report card, they gave our state a failing grade for ethics enforcement agencies. Our goal is to bring more sunshine to the Sunshine State. And we're #1 for our beaches, we're #1 for our sunshine. But it's time that we dust off our government in the sunshine law and once again become #1 in the world for government in the sunshine, for open government, for accountable government, and for ethical government. Today's report is intended to inform the Florida Commission on Ethics before their meeting on June 15th. At that time, at the June 15th meeting of the Florida Commission on Ethics, they will set their 2013 legislative priorities for ethics reform. We'll be at that meeting and be happy to help the Commission go through their policy recommendations. And this report, I'll just give a top 5 recommendations from Integrity Florida to deal with the problem of, to deal with our state's corruption problem. #1, we need to have self-initiation of investigations from our ethics law enforcement officers in Florida. The way we do ethics law enforcement in Florida, it's essentially like having speeding limits but no officers on the beat to catch speeders when they break the law. Right now, if there's an ethics law violation that you see on the TV news tonight or listen to on the radio or read about tomorrow's paper, the Florida Commission on Ethics cannot begin an investigation. They have to wait for you, the public, to send in a complaint. And that complaint has to be legally sufficient. And we had less than 200 complaints last year, despite leading the country in federal public corruption convictions from 2000 to 2010. Florida, we have a corruption problem. And we need to give our state ethics law enforcement officers the tools to pursue ethics law violators. #2, we need a report corruption hotline. Integrity Florida receives calls every day from the public concerned about corruption at all levels of government. Right now, we refer the public to the FBI. You can call 888-722-1225 to report corruption to our federal law enforcement investigators. But at the state level, we need a report corruption hotline to be housed at the Attorney General's office or the Florida Commission on Ethics. And you should be able to make an anonymous tip if you know about corruption going on in your community. #3, we need to expand our ethics code to follow the money. As CFO Jeff Atwater has stated recently, about $51 billion of our $70 billion budget goes to private vendors now. So with our money in the hands of private vendors, we need to make sure our ethics code follows them. And there's precedent for that as we've privatized functions of government in the past, like local government attorneys and local city managers. The ethics code has followed those folks in the private sector. So it's time we do that as we begin to privatize more prisons, schools, other functions of government. We also need to follow, we need to have an end to the insider trading going on in Tallahassee and at all levels of government. Any transaction of $1,000 or more by our public officials throughout the year needs to be disclosed each year. In Congress, they've been looking at a similar measure called the Stock Act. And we know that there's rampant insider trading on information that our public officials have and we don't. So we need to make sure they disclose all transactions above $1,000 each year. And finally, we need an online filing system for financial disclosure information about our officials. In this day and age, if it's not online, it doesn't exist. And while financial disclosure forms are filed each year by about 40,000 public officials in Florida, they're not available online. Integrity Florida is looking to develop a mobile app and a website to put that information out for the public to have, but we'd like to see our legislature take action and go ahead and put that information online, as we do campaign finance data, vendor data, other information about government. With that, happy to take any questions.
I wanted to ask specifically about the disclosure forms. You've done a story about how people in city government only have to fill out what's called Form 1, which is set by the legislature. You don't have to put a dollar amount at all. Do you think that's right? Should that be changed?
We need to look at Form 1 and Form 6. You know, our financial disclosure forms leave a lot of wiggle room for people to game the system. Right now we have about a little more than 1,000 officials that file the more detailed Form 6. But the bulk of our local government officials and others file the Form 1 that doesn't have much information. That needs to be looked at by the legislature. There's rampant insider trading going on in the city of Tallahassee and other levels of government. When you know information about where the road's going to be built, and you have stock in the company that's going to benefit from a bill, and you, a public official, are able to gain personally based on that information, and the public can't, that's wrong. So I think we need to look at that Form 1 and Form 6 of financial disclosure and see if we can add more detail to those forms.
You indicated that Florida leads the nation in corruption convictions.
Right.
Is that really a reflection that we have more corrupt people in politics or in business here in Florida, or is perhaps that a reflection of the fact that our laws are such that we're able to convict at a higher rate than other states?
Well, the conviction data we released today is based on federal public corruption convictions. And what it could mean is that the U.S. Department of Justice and the FBI, our federal law enforcement authorities, are doing a great job in Florida. And Florida's a large state, so we have a larger number of public officials than other states. So, but we compared Florida to other larger states, and from 1999 to 2010, Florida was top of the list, #1 in federal public corruption convictions 5 times. The states that came closest to Florida were Texas and California, three times each. So even compared to our larger states around the country, Florida has been a leader, and the trend is we're on an upward trend for more corruption. You combine that with having the most number of our cities in the top 10 list of Forbes magazine and having a failing grade for ethics enforcement agencies, and you put that all together, we're clearly the #1 state for corruption in the country.
Is there an area of Florida politics or business, perhaps either South Florida, you mentioned that 3 of those cities are in South Florida, but are we looking at mostly local government, or is it a state government problem, or is it all levels? Where is the problem here in Florida?
It's primarily at the local government level, just with the sheer number of local government officials. But this is a corruption problem at all levels. And my fear is that the problem's even worse. But we haven't given our state ethics law enforcement officers the tool to go enforce the law. We know of dozens of in the public ethics law violations that are there now. If you don't file your financial disclosure form, that's an ethics law violation. And someone could file an ethics complaint today for the folks, the dozens of people that either are late on their form or they have mistakes on those forms. We need to give our professionals at the state Ethics Commission the ability to just begin the investigation process to find out, why didn't you file the form? Why did you omit a key asset? Begin asking those questions, and in some cases maybe be able to resolve matters without the need for a big ethics complaint or investigation if it's a technical error. That's why we think filing online would also help public officials save time and money, possibly reduce some of their ethics law violations by doing it online with better information. More chance to correct errors in that process.
Dan, I want to ask you about outside income as well, because a lot of these local officials are not considered full-time, and yet, so they invest in other things. What do you think about city officials that invest in real estate that has to be approved by the city? Do you think that's correct?
Well, we have to do a full study. One of our upcoming reports is going to be just on conflicts